This video is sponsored by DevMountain. If you're interested in learning web development, iOS, or UX design, DevMountain is a 12-week design and development bootcamp intended to get you a full-time position in the industry. To learn more, visit devmountain.com or click the link in the description below. Hey, what's going on, guys? So I got a cool little project for you today. We're going to be building a typewriter script, or at least that's what I'm calling it, using just vanilla JavaScript, no jQuery or anything like that. I actually had a request to do something like this a while ago, and I thought it was a good idea. All right, now we're going to be using Es6 syntax, but I'm first going to do it with a constructor function and a prototype method, and then we're going to convert it into an Es6 class. So I'm going to show you how to kind of do it both ways. All right, and before we get started, I just wanted to give a shout out to one of my biggest patrons, Carlos Mafla, who actually has his own YouTube channel where he does some DevOps and web development videos. You can see he has videos on Chef, on React, Git, has some videos on the Vim text editor, so check his channel out. Also, if you're interested in becoming a patron, I'll put a link in the description for my patreon.com account. All right, so let's get started. We're going to jump into VS Code, and I've already created the files, but they're all empty. So we have index.html, style.css, and main.js. So we'll start off with creating our markup, which is very, very simple. So I'm going to use Emmet and just do exclamation tab to give us some basic head body tags. For the title, we'll just say welcome to my site, and we're going to link our style sheet, which is style.css, and then let's link our JavaScript. So down here we'll say script with the source of main.js. All right, so here let's go ahead and put a container. I'm going to use Flexbox just to kind of center things, and in here we're going to have an h1, and we're going to say, I'm going to put my name, but I would guess that you would put your name. And I'm going to say Brad Traversy the, and then we put a span tag. I'm actually going to put this on a separate line. So we're going to say span. I'm going to give this a class of txt-type. Okay, nothing's going to go in here. It's going to be put in through the JavaScript, but we do want to add some data attributes here. Okay, so with HTML5, we can add custom attributes as long as we put the word data before them, or data dash, and then we can access these within the JavaScript. So the first one is going to be data dash weight, and I'm going to set this to 3000. Okay, and let me explain what this is. So if we go back to the final product here, you notice that after it's done typing a word, it has a pause. Okay, so that pause is that wait time. That's what I'm calling it. And it's 3 seconds by default, which is 3000 milliseconds. So that's what this is. If you want it to be shorter or longer, you can change this. Next is going to be the actual words. So I'm going to call this data words. And I'm going to use single quotes here because I'm passing this in the format of an array. So we're going to use brackets here. And then we're going to put our each word like this. So I'm going to do developer. And obviously in HTML you don't have arrays. It's just looked at as a string. But when we get into the JavaScript, when we fetch this, we're going to run it through JSON.parse so that we can use it as an object. All right. So we're going to do developer. What else? Designer. And creator. And feel free to change these up if you want. Okay, so that should be it for the span. Next thing we want to do is just a little h2 underneath. So I'm going to put an h2, and I'm just going to say welcome. We'll say welcome to my website. That's it. That's our HTML. So I'm going to save it, and then you can either just open it, double click on the HTML file, open it up. If you have some other server that you use, that's fine. I'm using Live Server. That is a VS Code extension. So I'm going to go ahead and open it with that. And there we go. So that's what we see so far. So now I'm going to jump into the CSS. And for the CSS, I am going to type it out just because I hate copying and pasting, but I'm not going to explain every little thing, and it's not that complicated anyway. It's just a little bit of Flexbox just to center things and just add font sizes and stuff like that. So pretty simple. I am going to paste in the import because I want to use the Railway font from Google Fonts, so we just want to do that. And then we'll go ahead and do the body and say font family, and we want to set that to Railway, and let's say sans serif. So I want the height of the body to be 100 viewport height, so take up the whole thing, no matter how big or small the browser sized. For the background, you don't have to do the background image. I'm actually going to put the color in here of 333, which is almost black, really dark gray, and then I'm going to do the URL, but you don't have to have the image if you don't want. So let's say showcase.jpg, which I already have. I'm going to say no repeat, and let's do center on both the X and Y axis, and let's do cover. Okay, so it covers the whole background. And then for the color, for the text color, I'm going to do CCC, which is like a light gray. And then I'm just going to do an overflow hidden so that there's no scroll bars. Okay, you wouldn't do this if you have more content under the main area. So let's save that and just take a look at it. So it looks like that now. Okay, now next thing I'm going to do is the container. So the container wraps around everything, and this is what I'm going to display as flex. So we're going to display as flexbox. If I do that, it's gonna be in a horizontal fashion. I don't want that. I want it to go vertical. So we just need to change the flex direction to column. All right, and I want to justify the content into the center. Okay, I want it to be centered not horizontally but vertically. So let's say center, and in order to do that, we have to have a height on our container. So let's do 100%. And I don't mean to poke fun at. I don't know if you guys watch Dev Tips, but MPJ and David had a video recently where they were trying to center something using CSS, and it was comical. I mean, they're like geniuses in JavaScript, but to watch them fumble around to try to center something in CSS was pretty hilarious. And I don't mean that in any disrespectful way at all. I know that a lot of genius developers, they have trouble with CSS and UI and stuff like that. But check that video out. I'm again saying it with the utmost respect. I really admire those guys. I watch their channel, but it is pretty funny. So anyways, let's go ahead and add some padding here. And I'm just going to do 0 on the top and bottom, and let's say 3 rem on the left and right. All right, so if we take a look at that, now you can see that that's centered. I don't like how far apart these are. Also, of course, we want this bigger. So let's add, let's see, we're going to say H1 and H2. Oops, that should be a comma. So H1 and H2 will say font dash weight 200, and let's do margin. I'm just going to do 0.4 rems. And if you're not familiar with rems, I don't really want to get into it in this video because I want to hurry up with the CSS. But I do have a video called, what is it called? Rem and M units explained, where I go through what they are. Also, I talk about VH and VW units in CSS. So the H1, I actually want the font size. Let's see, we'll say font size 3.5 rem. And then the H2, I'm going to say font size, let's do 2 rem. And let's make the color a little darker. So I'm going to do AAA in hexadecimal. Okay, so let's save that and take a look. Okay, and obviously it's not going to say the word here. That's going to come in through the JavaScript. Now, I do want to add some media queries because I want, for one thing, I want the text to be bigger if it's past like 1200, if the screen is past 1200, and then if it's smaller, I want to make the text smaller. So we're just going to add some media queries real quick. We're almost done here. So let's do media, and let's do a let's do a min width of 1200 pixels. Okay, so this will be anything that's over 1200 pixels. If the browser is stretched out past that, then I want the H1 to be bigger. So I want to say font size, let's do 5 rem. So now if we look where we are past 1200, now the text is much bigger. All right, whoops, I have a whole bunch of shit open here. So next media query I want to do is for max width of 800. I want to make the text a little smaller, so I'm going to copy this and we're going to do max width of 800, and let's see, for the H1 I want to change the font size to 3. Originally it's 3.5. Also, whoops, I also want to do the container. I just want to take some padding away from the container, just so there's not so much on the side when it's on a smaller screen. Originally it's 0.3 rem, but I'm going to do 0.1 rem. Oops, I should probably put the friggin' padding. All right, and then one more. That's going to be for screens that are 500 pixels or smaller. So let's do at media, and let's say max width 500 pixels, and we're just going to say for that H1, what do we want H1 to be? Let's do font size. So it's originally 3.5. Let's do 2.5. Okay, for the H1. And I'm also going to do the H2. So we'll say H2. And let's say font size, which is originally 2 rem. I'm going to do 1.5 rem. All right, and that should do it. So yeah, let's take a look at that. Okay, so if I were to make this smaller, when we hit around 1200 it goes down, when we hit around 800 it goes down, and 500 it goes down. Good. So now it's responsive. Now we can start with the fun part, which is the JavaScript. So let's go to main.js, and like I said, we're going to start off by creating a constructor function with a method called type that basically does everything, and we're going to initialize that, and then afterwards I'm going to show you how we can just change it to an Es6 class if you wanted to do it that way. So let's create a const called typewriter. Okay, that's what I'm going to call this constructor function. We're going to say equals function. Okay, and this is going to take in 3 things. It's going to take in a txt element, okay, which is actually that span that's in the HTML. It's going to take in the words, which is going to come from the data words attribute, which has the little array of the 3 words I put, and then the wait time, which is going to be the amount that it waits before it starts deleting. Okay, when it gets to the end and it starts deleting, which I'm actually going to give a default of 3000. All right, and then in here, where we have a constructor function, we can assign properties using this keyword. Okay, we're going to have a bunch of stuff here. One is going to be text element, which we're going to set to text element that's passed in, and we're going to set this dot words as a property, and that'll be set to the words that are passed in. We'll have this dot txt, which will be set to nothing by default. What txt represents is whatever is currently in this area. Okay, if I go ahead and reload, when it's at like dev, that's what is txt. Okay, and you'll learn more as we move along. I know it might seem a little confusing at first. Then we also need the index of the word. We need to know which word we're on. And the words are basically going to be formatted as an array, and you know that arrays start at 0, so we're going to set word index to 0 by default. Okay, and then this dot wait, it's going to be equal to whatever's passed in here, but we want to make sure that it's an integer. Okay, so we're actually going to run it through a JavaScript function called parseInt. So we'll say wait, and then we just want a second parameter of the base, which is going to be base 10. Okay, it's a base 10 number. We also want the method of type. okay, because that's going to be the main method that is associated with this typewriter that does everything. And then we're going to have is deleting. This dot is deleting, which is going to be a Boolean, and that's going to just be it represents the state if it's deleting or not. So if we go and we look at the final project, when it's going backwards and actually deleting, that's going to be where is deleting is true. Okay, is deleting is true. Now is deleting is false. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now we will have the type method here, which will be, it'll actually do everything, but I want to just initialize this first before we start doing the type method. So to initialize it, we're going to run it when the DOM loads. Okay, so we'll say init on DOM load. So we need an event handler. You could do like window.onload if you want, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set on the document an event listener using add event listener, and the event I want to listen to is DOM content loaded, and then I want to run a function called init. Okay, and then that function is basically going to init our app. Okay, so let's do function init. And here's where we need to kind of grab everything, like we need to get the span, the whole element itself. We also need to get the attributes, meaning like the words and the wait time, the data attributes that were passed in. So let's start off with grabbing the element itself. I'm going to call this txt element. We're going to set it to document.querySelector. Okay, and I believe it had a class of txt-type. Okay, so we'll grab that. Now we want to grab the words. Okay, so we'll say const words, and we can get the words by taking the txt element and doing a get attribute, which will get any attribute we want. The attribute we're looking for is data-words, which is this right here. Okay, so we want to grab this. Now we need to actually parse this, okay, so that we can use it in our JavaScript. Otherwise it's just looked at as a string. So we want to actually run this through a method called JSON.parse. Okay, make sure you add the ending parentheses as well. Next thing we need is the weight. Okay, so the weight that's passed in, we can get that with text element dot get attribute, and we're looking for data-weight. All right, and then the last thing we need to do here is just initialize the typewriter. So we do that with new. We use the keyword new and then typewriter, and we pass in all three things, so text element, words, and weight. Okay, so that's going to initialize this up here. So if I save and run this, the only error we should see is that there's no type method because we're claiming it here, but we haven't created it. So let's go ahead and open up, actually that's the finished product. Let's go here and let's open up our console, and there it is. This dot type is not a function. So let's go ahead and fix that. Now the way that we add a method to our typewriter is by using prototype. So we want to say typewriter dot prototype and then the name of the method, which I'm calling type. Okay, and we want to set that equal to a function. And I mean, this part is actually really hard to teach. So I'm going to try to do it in a way that's understandable rather than just going top to bottom. So at the very end, we're going to want to run a set timeout because we obviously, each time it types in something, each time a character gets typed or deleted, this is running. So we actually want to run it at a certain pace. So in our set timeout, it takes in a function. You could do like function. I'm going to use an arrow. And I just want to call this dot type. I want to call this actual method. And then the second parameter is how often. I'm going to say a half a second, so 500 milliseconds. And then right now, all this is going to do is console log. So I'll say console log hello. And if we go ahead and save that, we run this in our browser, you'll see every half a second it's going to output hello. Okay, so at least we have our I guess our stream of whatever we're going to do happening. Obviously we want to be outputting text here and then deleting and all that, but at least the type method is running. So the first thing I want to do in this function is get the current index of the word, okay, because basically each word, if we look at our words here, they each have an index. So this will be 0, 1, 2, and so on. If you add more, that's fine. This is scalable, so you can have as many words as you want, more or less. So I'm going to say right here, current index of word. And the way that we're going to get that is by saying const. I'm just going to call this current. You can call it index or I or whatever. I'm going to call it current, and I'm going to take the word index, which by default is 0, because obviously arrays are 0 based, and that's basically what our words are. And then we're going to use the modulus operator and say we just want to get the total length of the words array. So this dot words dot length, like that. All right, now if I were to console dot log current, let's take a look here. Oops. We're going to just get 0, okay? And it's going to keep being 0 over and over and over because we haven't added any other logic. So the next thing I want to do is I want to get the full text of the current word, okay? So whatever word it's on, whether it's developer, designer, creator, I want to get the full text. So let's say get full text of current word. I know I'm gonna be commenting this a lot just so that it can kind of explain what's going on. So say const, let's call it full txt, and we're gonna set it to this dot words, okay, which is just our array of words, and then the current index, okay, whether it's 0, 1, or 2, or if we add more words, it could be whatever. So let's go ahead and output full text, and I'm sure you guys can guess what that's gonna be or what that's gonna do. It's going to give us an error. Full text is not defined. It's because this should be an uppercase T. All right, so now we're just gonna see the first word over and over. Okay, so far so good. Now the next thing I want to do is check to see if it's in the deleting state or not. So I'm gonna get rid of this, and I'm gonna say check if. We'll say check. Yeah, check if deleting. Okay, and the way that we'll do that is simply by checking, it's going to be an else too. So we do that by checking this dot is deleting, which is a property that's set to false by default. So obviously at first it's going to be false. Now if it is deleting, of course we're going to remove a character, right? If it isn't deleting, then we're going to add a character. So actually let's start with add. So to add a character, we're going to take this dot text txt, which represents whatever is currently in there in the span, I guess, and then we're going to take full text, so full txt, and we're going to call substring. Okay, we'll pass in 0, and then we want this dot txt dot length. Okay, whatever that length is, we're going to add 1 to it. Okay, so remember, when it starts out, the length is 0 because it's just an empty string. If it's not deleting here, it's going to add 1 to it. If it is deleting, we want to take 1 away. So we're going to have the same thing, except we're going to say -1 instead of adding 1. Okay, and then what I want to do after that is just output whatever is in this dot text. Okay, now remember this type method, it's running every half a second. So I want to output whatever is in this dot text every half a second. So let's say insert txt into element So we have the txt element, which is the span. Okay, so it's this right here. This whole thing is the text element. I actually want to insert into it another span. So that's what we're going to do. So let's say dot inner HTML. And we want to set this to be another span. And I'm actually going to give this a class of txt. And the reason I'm doing that is because we're going to use CSS to create the cursor effect, which is going to be really easy. You'll see that at the end. And then inside here, we want to put whatever the value of the current value of this .txt. Now I could concatenate, but I'm going to stick to ES6. So I'm going to use backticks here so that I can use a template literal. And I can simply go like that, use this syntax, and say this.txt. All right, so now if I save this, what should happen is it should at least spell out the first word up to this point. So let's save that. Let's go back. And there we go. Now it's going to stop at the end because we haven't done any more functionality other than that. We haven't told it to move on to the next word index or anything like that. We haven't told it what to do to delete. So that's what we're going to work on next. Now I'm going to set a value here that we're going to use in a couple different ways, and this is going to be the type speed. Okay, and the type speed is going to change quite a bit. Initially, I want to set it to 300, okay, which is 300 milliseconds, but we're going to want to change it at different points. Like when it's deleting, I want it to go faster. When it gets to the end, I want it to actually pause. So I want to set it to whatever the wait time is. So it's going to be dynamic, so I'm going to use let. Okay, so let type speed, and we're going to set that to 300. All right, let's say initial type speed because this is variable. Okay, now I just want to check to see if it's deleting, because if it's deleting, I want it to go faster. So we'll say if this dot is deleting, then we're going to say type speed is we're going to use this slash. So basically slash equals 2. So we're going to cut it in half. And this is like saying equals type speed divided by 2. It's like doing that. It's just a shorthand method. So type speed slash equals 2. That'll make it, what, 150 milliseconds? Because when we delete, we want it to go faster. All right, so that'll do that. Next thing I want to do is check and see if the word is complete. Okay, and we can do that by basically matching whatever is in this .text, whatever value is in here. If it matches the full text of the word, then we want to move on, right? We want to move to the next word. So let's say if word is complete. Okay, so I'm going to say if not, Jesus Christ, if not this dot is deleting. Okay, so if not is deleting, and this .txt is equal to whatever full text is. So if this .txt is equal to developer, which is the full text of the first word, then we want to do a couple things. We want to set type speed to whatever the wait value is. Okay, because we want it to pause. And if the type speed is equal to 3 seconds, okay, so 3,000 milliseconds, then it's going to set a little pause at the end. So that's what this is going to do. Let me just add a comment here. So this will make pause at end. And then we want to set is deleting to true. Set delete to true. True has an E in it. So this dot is deleting is now going to be set to true. And then we want to do an else if. Okay, so this else if is going to be if this dot is deleting and this.txt is equal to nothing. So basically this point means when it after it completely deletes the word, when it gets to that point, that's what do we want to do? We want to change the word, right? So let me just show you on the finished project. Okay, so we're going at the end, the typing speed will get put to the wait time, and then when it goes all the way back, that's when this if statement runs, or that's when this conditional that we just put in runs. And then we want to switch to the next word. All right, and this is really hard to explain. Hopefully you guys are following. All right, so we first of all want to set deleting back to false. Okay, so is deleting is going to be set back to false. And then we want to move to the next word. Okay, we do that by simply doing this dot word index, and we just want to increment it by 1, so we'll just do plus plus. Okay, and then I want to pause a little bit before we start typing. So let's say pause before start typing. So I'm going to set type speed equal to 500. And then instead of putting a hard-coded 500 in here, I'm actually going to put my type speed in. So, okay, so this should give us a nice effect of typing fast, stopping at the end for a couple seconds, deleting even faster, taking a tiny little pause, and then going back, okay, and keep doing that over and over. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's save this and check it out. So we'll go to our version, and I'm going to reload. Okay, so developer waits, starts deleting faster, goes again, designer waits, deletes, and you can increase or decrease that wait time. Remember, that's an attribute in the HTML, and then it should just start over in developer. Cool. So the JavaScript is done, aside from me showing you how to turn it into a class. But what I want to do now is just add the cursor, because right now, I mean, it looks cool, but it looks better to have the little cursor there to give it that real effect. So to do that is very, very easy. We just go to style.css, make sure you're not in a media query. Oops, cursor. And remember, in our JavaScript, when we did the span insert with the actual text, we gave it a class of txt. And this is inside of that other span. So it's important that we go like this. What was it? Text type, txt dot type is the outer span. And then we just want to say the dot txt inside of it. We want to set a border. What do we want to do here? We want to do a border right, and set that. We'll set the width to 0.2. 0.2 rem. Let's do solid, and for the color, I'll do 777. Okay, so we'll go back, and there we go. Now we have a cursor, which looks a lot better. All right, so we are done except for the class part. Okay, so if you want to use Es6 Classes, which does the same thing, it's just a different way of writing it. I'm going to go to the bottom here, and let's say Es6 class. And what we would do is do a class of typewriter. Okay, actually, I'm sorry, we don't want to do that. So class of typewriter, and we would have a constructor. Okay, a constructor is just a method that runs when the object is instantiated from the class. So basically when you do this. All right, now the constructor is going to take in the same stuff that our constructor function took in up here. So if I want to grab this and put that in the constructor, and then I could grab everything we did here, put that in here. Okay, again using this keyword. Let's just move this stuff over. I don't have prettier on right now. So we have our constructor, and then what we would do instead of creating a prototype method is we would just create a method within the class called type. Okay, and everything within type is going to be the same exact thing. So everything that's in this prototype.type function, I'm going to grab down to the set timeout. I've got a semicolon there. I know I don't need it, but I like to use them. And paste that in type. Okay. And let me just move this stuff over. And that's going to do the same exact thing. Okay. And we can initialize it the same way. So what I'll do is grab this init stuff and cut it. And I'm going to put it below the class like that. And then I'm going to comment out all of this. Everything above the typewriter class that I just created, I'm going to just comment out. And we'll go ahead and save it. And let's go back to our application, make sure it's reloaded. And there we go. It does the same exact thing. No errors. Good. So it's your choice on how you want to write stuff like this. If you want to use classes or if you want to do it this way, it's doing the same exact thing. And I just wanted to show you that. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed this project, guys. If you did, please leave a thumbs up. And that's it. I will see you in the next video.